My name is Alana Krolikovsky. I'm a political scientist here in the Department of History and Political Science. I welcome all of you to find a comfy little seat and settle into our afternoon session on critical minerals workforce development, how to grow the U.S. critical minerals workforce. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce this afternoon our keynote speaker, Mr. Leigh Freeman of the Leigh Freeman Consultancy. In leadership roles, over his 40-plus years of experience in over 30 countries, Mr. Freeman ticked the box in exploration, mine development, finance, production, and BODs for large and small mining companies. His recent focus is corporate strategies, team building, including talent recruitment, minerals education, and enjoying his 5 delightful grandchildren. Mr. Freeman serves as the chairman of Timberline Resources and as a senior mining advisor to Stanton Chase Global, a large executive recruiting company. He is active in minerals education with 3 of the mining schools, SME, and the National Academy of Sciences. Mr. Freeman is a proud engineering graduate of Montana Tech. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Freeman.
I was asked to share some thoughts on recruitment based on my 40 years of mining experience, including 20 years of work as a headhunter. I ran across a story recently when I was putting this talk together, a cautionary note, something to think about as we digest our lunch. As you know you're getting older when our happy hour is a 60-minute nap. I know we're approaching my nap time, but be aware that this is a 30-minute talk, and I'll be embarrassed if you nap over into the next speaker. What I'm going to be doing here is going over nuts and bolts. I was specifically asked to address mining engineers and extractive metallurgists, which SME considers as critical professions. But all of these comments would be applicable to other fields. And I'm going to focus on the next 5 years. The problem is really severe, so we need to be acting now. I think we all had similarly educated professors in school, and they many times started their engineering courses with this statement, clearly stating a problem is halfway to the solution. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but it's in the same general direction of the solution. This problem here is really simply stated, few candidates match our search criteria. Traditional criteria to recruit talent is ineffective and will soon be impossible. And I'll show you the data to support that idea, because lowering the competency bar is unacceptable. You've all seen this slide, I think. If you're in the mining business, you're certainly aware of it. And what it is the talent pool for mining engineers. That's the 50 years of mining engineering graduates. And you can see it peaked in the early 80s and then dipped down. The sustaining rate is deemed to be something like 300 a year, so we're well below that rate. And what I've highlighted here are the people that are in the typical recruiting window of when we're wanting people to bring in leadership roles. And that's 10 years out of school, or roughly 10 years out of school, so they've got practical experiences and can be effective leaders and not retired. And the frightening thing there is in that diagram, that blue area, the large blue area, 40% are retirement age. And I never had a search assignment that said, or that I felt, because we can't talk about age when we're recruiting, but that I felt that if I produced a really good candidate, 62 years old, that would be who they would snap up right away. So really the recruitment window is already into that problem. And to get people ready for it is 4 years of undergraduate, or 5, or 6, and then a bunch of years to get practical experience to know how to use that information. So fundamentally, and these are kind of 4 recommendations with a caveat at the bottom that I'm going to expand on, but fundamentally we need to expand the talent pool. And you're not going to like the recommendation, but recruit and develop more professionals currently working outside the mining industry. It's been talked about before, but literally we don't have a choice, and I'll go over some details supporting that. The other 3 recommendations here are a family of that first recommendation. If we're going to bring people in that are less familiar with the mining industry, we have to work on their competencies specifically. So broaden their competencies. Then we need to modify organizational structures to backfill in the idea that we're going to have less technical experts. So we need to be using the concept of chief or specialist engineer more commonly in our organizations. And then, God forbid, use more systems and procedures as a safety net, because we're going to miss some people. Now, the bigger problem here, but can't be solved at this time frame, but for us to be aware of, is we need to improve work-life balances. Modifications to hiring practices. And I'll say it very specifically, develop civil and mechanical engineers to serve as mining engineers. Develop material science and chemical engineers as mineral processing and extractive metallurgical engineers. And then developed MBAs with strong STEM backgrounds for strategic, tactical, and operating roles. It's not very popular. The first thing you're going to be thinking about is that we're short mechanical engineers and civil engineers, and that's true. You recruit for this campus. So you know, getting students into those programs and through those programs, it's hard to find those students. But here's some numbers so we can be thinking of what we're working with. US graduates 21,000 civil engineers a year, 45,000 mechanical engineers a year, and I have no idea where they get all those MBAs. 850,000. From this talent pool, we need less than 200 people here. So you could just recruit civil engineers that were born in Nebraska and get to that number. Those numbers are very approachable, and they're going to be people that are not aware of mining, not aware of the opportunities because they don't even know we still mine, that we're going to be able to be and have opportunities to bring into the industry. And we've already been following this path. These are 5 examples of people that are centerpieces to talent in the mining industry. Mary Polden, Professor Emeritus, University of Arizona, Geological Engineering and Mining Engineering Department head. Pierre Lassonde is a billionaire, electrical engineering degree, and really created the mining royalty business. Gene Hull, civil engineer, retired executive vice president for Peabody Coal, and now serves on boards all around the world. Tom Palmer, engineering science degree, CEO of Newmont, and Jacob Stockholm, degree in economics. So already we're recruiting from there for our most important leadership roles. We just need to be recognizing that process and do more and more work to be able to recruit those people out of school. Now, an interesting denominator when I looked at this, who has mining engineers nominally, but that don't actually have mining engineering degrees, and a common denominator was Rio Tinto. 3 of these 5 people have Rio Tinto heritages. They were recruited and developed as mining engineers in the mining industry for one of the better employers in the world. Broader development of competencies. Now, obviously, if we're going to be bringing people in that are less familiar, don't even necessarily know the language that we're using, so you're not going to be very effective at a mine site if you can't speak the language and can't pronounce metallurgy. So we're going to need to improve that continuous development, formal learning, practice and repeat, and be able to be effective. And then along the way, we're also going to need to upgrade human resource departments because there's a lot more demands in dealing with these issues, including the training programs, to be able to be effective. Now, I'll give you one example that I've got from recruiting mine planner. I had a good friend that was the general VPGM for an underground gold mine in Nevada, one of the really big companies. And he called me in a panic. He said, I need a couple mining engineers as planners right away. So I came out and visited with him. I said, can I visit with the 3 that you've got? Because you need 2 more, and I want to get a sense of the work environment and challenges and all that. So I sat down with them during the day, basically interviewed them, and I said, what's the issue? What are going to be the challenges of getting people out here? And he said, they didn't know that VPGM was my really good friend, said he lied to us. He said and it was a really good company, so they had really good programs. And he said when they recruited me, they said they'd be sending me to conferences, they'd be sending me to short courses. This was an opportunity to really learn the business. And they lied. And they were prepared to quit because there was no way out of the circle. At the same problem, there was just the 3 of them as mine planners, and if one of them quit, it would just be hell for the other 2. So they were still there. So that night I had dinner with my friend, and I said, boy, you got a bit of a problem here. They say you lied to them. He said, I did. I didn't mean to, but I did. In order for me to rotate them out to take short courses, I'll have 2 mining engineers, and the mine doesn't run unless I have 3. That's a tipping point. So that problem, when we let the problem get into our systems, start to affect the entire problem. Some modifications to corporate structures. This idea that we need to upgrade the concept of 2 career tracks. Now, we still talk about that, but in practice, we virtually don't practice it within the mining industry, and it's going to be necessary for critical minerals. So we're going to be more reliance on chief and specialist type people. Make a comment on Defense Department contractors. You probably know this, but Lockheed Martin employs the largest number of engineers in the U.S., engineers and technicians, 60,000 of them. One of my kids has a degree in engineering physics. He works for Ball Aerospace, chief engineer in one of the divisions. He's been there about 20 years. So he came by the house for dinner here a little while ago and said, I'm going to move over to the management track. And I said, well, that shocks me because I know you just love the engineering side and you said you were avoiding that for a long, long time. And he said, I can't keep up. I've been out of school 20 years. There's stuff that's being learned. I'm taking short courses as fast as I can, but I can't keep up with the rate of change. So I'm going to have to switch to the management track because I know the systems and things like that, but I can't keep up with the technology. What's that tell you about people focused on technologies and employing technologies regularly, defense contractors, and their organizational structures? Because that's how the people go through the system. They really do have dual tracks. We should consider that. Reliance on corporate systems. We all hate these things. I think the first thing we have to do is make sure that we can standardize the modifications. But we do have to have a safety net as we start putting people into the system that don't know practices, rules of thumb, guidelines that we all learned when we came through the system, that you just really shouldn't challenge those unless you've really been thinking carefully. So we'll have to have systems and procedures that have these things written down, and then if you want to vary on that, then you can think of it carefully. But we can't have people working below the waterline. Now some headhunting learnings. Quality of life is increasingly important in career decisions. Our kids are not the same as we were. And what I did growing up was really bad. I just worked all the time. And that's not acceptable. And luckily, our kids know that. And that's one of the big problems we have with STEM education professions now, is that work-life balance is a long ways out of balance. Now, in 1974, there was a book written called Passages, Predictable Crises in Adult Life. And this concept is really taken from that book. And that's that when people are sitting there at a particular age, you can start to anticipate the circumstances that they're dealing with. So number one, spouse is likely working. When you're talking with people about recruiting, be aware of that and address it. 30-year-olds have school-age dependents. 40-year-olds have college-age dependents. Those are cash flow issues. 50-year-olds have aging parents and can't probably be too far away from that. Now, when we were going through the systems, we wouldn't necessarily orient our career around all of those issues. Today, people do, and that's appropriate. So when we're recruiting people, we have to be conscious of that quality of life issue, broadly called quality of life. You also can call it millennials, you can call it all other kinds of issues, but it's people that woke up. How to compete. There's really three things, and they're very, very center to the recruiting concept. Have an attractive corporate culture. Number one. Number two, well-developed program for career advancement. That's my friend that ran these planning engineers. He had the plan, the company had it well in place, and I knew people that went through it, and it was a very good program. They didn't have enough people to put into the program because they were too desperate for people. And then that life-work balance. This is maybe even counterintuitive. Good candidates don't change jobs for money. You can't afford to develop somebody who is on the auction block. If they change once for money, they're likely to change again for money. You bring them in because you treat them fairly with your compensation and you allow them to continue to improve their careers. If you're buying people to get into a position, you've really created a future liability and you have a good chance of losing your investment. One little thought, if you've been around Caterpillar, they spend a fortune developing their people and they hardly ever lose anybody. They develop that culture, and once they're into that system, they're into that system. So they recruit to and keep their people based on that culture. High potential professionals seldom look for jobs. LinkedIn is really handy, but it's passive recruiting. And trust me, really high potential people paying attention to their careers are not sitting at their desk hoping to find a job. If they are either happy with their job or they found a new job, and they're efficient at getting to that spot to find that new job. So the chances that you catch one of those people going through the system on the day they decided they were going to change a job is really low. So if you're just data mining in LinkedIn and firing off things, your chances of catching the kind of people that we need as leader in the industry is really low. A financial analyst story. I got a job assignment from a company they weren't really a finance equity group, but in principle they were. And the job's a real small company, but really well financed. And they needed a financial analyst. And the financial analyst was going to report to the COO. They asked me if I could find somebody. So I started making phone calls. And you don't make the phone calls really calling somebody to say, do you want this job? Because that's not the way it works. These people, unreasonable to expect they're actually looking for a job. You're calling them because they will know people that might. So I made a lot of calls. Guy said, I'm perfectly happy with my job right now. It's just going great, blah, blah, blah. One guy said, gosh, I have a classmate, and he just said he might have to change jobs. So I said, well, what's the story? Can you give me the background? And he said, yeah, he and his wife decided to have more kids. And he'd moved far enough into the organization that the future for the company was international travel. And he talked with them about it, but jobs were international travel. So he had to pop out. And he's been at that job now for 15 years. He was not looking for a job, but he had a friend that I was able to contact that directed me to him, allowed me to use his name to make that phone call, and he changed jobs. That's how you get good people. Identifying qualified candidates is the easy part. With 10 years experience, they're really obvious. I had a conversation with a senior executive with one of the great big mining companies saying our most secret piece of information is our high potential list. And I said, give me a break. I can tell you probably 90% of the people that are on your high potential list. I make the same lists. These people are really obvious. They're SME young leaders. They're leaders in the community. They're leaders in their church. They're giving technical presentations. They're reviewers on technical articles. All you have to do is pay attention to what's going on, and those leaders stand right up. That high potential lister is right there. And they're happy. So the issue then isn't finding one of those people, it's coming up with a story with a strong enough culture and career opportunities that they say, gee, I'm not looking for a job, but describe that again. What do you think I'd be doing? Let me go home and talk with my spouse and see if we could potentially consider something like that. So that becomes the challenge for recruiting good people. Sourcing candidates. As I've been describing here, it's about networks. Good people know good people, mediocre people know mediocre people. That's the mantra in the search business. So if you want to find good people, call good people. Find their classmates, find people that they've worked with in the past. Those people know those people, and they'll put you in touch with them. This is insidious. All the chairs will be filled. So we need a certain number of mining engineers. Let's just say we needed 300 a year, and we don't have them anymore. You think we're going to have empty chairs? Before we run out of people, we run out of competent people. So once you start bringing, you lower the bar on the competency, you actually then destroy your organization and you destroy your culture. And I give a lot of talks to graduating seniors, mostly in mining and metallurgy. Most careers are limited by social rather than technical competencies. You might get by really well in the first 3 or 4 years as an individual contributor because you can run the computer stuff, you can do AutoCAD, you can do all those other kind of things. But when social skills come in to be able to demonstrate leadership and contribute in a very positive way on teams, the wheels come off. And if you put socially, let's just say, challenged people into an organization, and it isn't very long before you tip it over. And then you're stuck with real problems in recruiting people. If I want to get somebody going, this statement gets them. Resumes don't lie. Unprofessional candidates self-identify when you do the references. So when you're interviewing them, get the details. Understand when they changed jobs, when they didn't change jobs, why, what are the details, who did you work with, what did you accomplish when you were there. And if they were exaggerating, it's obvious. So any problem with a resume that lies isn't the problem that people that wrote it down, it's the people that didn't check to see where the exaggerations were. Assessing resumes. You need to read them like a life story. They're supposed to be, 2 pages now or something like that? I usually say, send me your 2-page thing or your 1-page thing, whatever it is, but send me the encyclopedic version. I'd like to look through it. But particularly what you do is you look at each job responsibility change or a lack of a job change responsibility, because it offers you a peek in between the lines of their career. Because what you're really doing is interpreting career momentum. Significant increases in responsibility should occur every 2 to 3 years. That's that career development path. That's learn, practice to proficiency, innovate, sometimes be able to get there, and move on. And if you're not doing that on a 2 or 3 year frequency, you're making a mistake, or you've got other issues like aging parents, so that you can't be able to take those other job assignments. But if you look at the momentum in those resumes, it will describe to you not necessarily even their technical competency, but it demonstrates their social competency. Because at some point in time, those technical competencies need to be multiplied into team effects. In summary, we need to expand the workforce. And that workforce is easy. There's lots of people out there that we can potentially bring in. We have a practice of already doing that. We need to be able to routinely approach these people and have programs to be able to develop them. And as I said, we only need 100 or 200 a year to be able to make this difference. The other 3 recommendations, all part of that first recommendation: better competency developments, modifications as a safety net, and increased reliance on corporate systems as a safety net. Thank you.